Hello, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us for tonight's Preservation School class, Neon Lighting, Now and Then. We have several in-person scenic landmark and conference tours throughout the month and our Grassroots Preservation Awards on June 18th. Information about all of our upcoming programming can be found on our website, hdc.org. If you have any questions about programming, you can contact me at marbulu@hdc.org. Tonight's class will be recorded and posted to our YouTube channel for free viewing. You may also watch all of our previous Preservation School classes, virtual tours, and conference panels on our YouTube channel. I would like to thank the New York City Department of Cultural Affairs, City Council, and the New York State Council on the Arts for supporting Preservation School. If you have any questions, you can add them to the chat and Jeff will address them at the end. Now I will hand it over to Let There Be Neon's Jeff Friedman to lead tonight's class. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. So I'm going to talk a little bit about Let There Be Neon's history. We're going to focus in on the preservation and renovation work, which is, of course, the focus of this talk. So what I'd like to do initially is just talk a little bit about Let There Be Neon. So Let There Be Neon was formed and founded by Rudy Stern, who's shown on the screen now, in the original gallery, which was on West Broadway and Prince Street in the Soho district of Manhattan in 1972. Rudy was a working artist. He worked in paint, film, video, light projections, and always had a love for neon, and opened up what he considered to be the first neon gallery ever, like I said, in 1972. There were many artists working in neon prior to the opening of Let There Be Neon. There were people like Chrissa, Douglas Wheeler, Bruce Nauman. But what Rudy did for the first time ever, as far as we're concerned, was that he brought neon to the masses, meaning that anybody could, for the first time, walk into our space and order a custom neon sign of their own, which was virtually unheard of at that time unless you were a large corporation or business. I would like to share a few photos of the early gallery of Rudy. The one on the screen currently is showing him holding a cigarette, which unfortunately is what wound up killing him from lung cancer about 11 years ago. But you can see in the background, this black and white photo, a lot of the original designs that Let There Be Neon created. You could also see in the lower back left-hand corner is a hanging piece that says Let There Be Neon, which was actually the piece that was photographed for Rudy's first book, which was published in '78 by Abrams. This is another shot, very, very early shot of the gallery, showing some really crude neon designs, most of which we created, except for the kosher sign. That was pretty common. And this is a photo of Rudy taken in about 1984 in front of the original gallery on West Broadway. It's a beautiful shot. Photographer was Abe Resney. Shows outside looking into the gallery. There were these crazy stucco caves, which actually were in the space before we took over. I myself came to work at Let There Be Neon in 1977. Been here ever since. Rudy was a completely insane individual to work with, but he really was quite a mentor to me and many others. I want to talk a little bit about what Let There Be Neon does currently, and then we can get into the renovation work. This is a video that's going to come up in a moment of the piece that is in the Hirshhorn Museum in Washington, D.C. This is a Namjoon Pike piece. Pike was a very early video and neon artist, and this is called the Information Highway. And we fabricated the neon for this piece, not the structure or the video screens. The video screens show various scenes from the film Wizard of Oz, each section being in a different state. And I'm going to play that video one more time. No, I guess I'm not. So this is another piece of contemporary artwork that we've done. This is with the British artist Tracy Emin. And Tracy was a long time proactive neon artist. And we've done a tremendous amount of work with her. And I'm sure that her work will look familiar to a lot of people. more contemporary art that we've worked on. This is a piece by the Chilean artist Ivan Navarro. It's called the Armory Fence because it was installed at the New York Armory at one of the art shows. And it uses close to 900,000 feet of neon. And the neon is on a structure on all four sides. And it's really a striking piece. And this is another piece by Navarro, which is a drum kit. And he's really quite known for these infinity pieces. And we've been doing a lot of that work with him as well. And this is an actual drum kit that has neon inside each of the drum pieces and is set up as a regular drum kit. This is a retail display that we worked on for Uniqlo for a Christmas display, just showing the tremendous amount of neon and what's possible with graphics and design, which we'll talk a little bit about more after the slideshow. Just another display piece. This was a piece for Disney that was done at Hudson Yards. It was only up for a brief period of time for a promotion of theirs. And Mickey is about 5.5, 6 feet tall here, just to put it in perspective. And it was a really striking display. And it's just another example of some of the work that we do in addition to the renovation work. And this is the first renovation piece that I wanted to share. This is probably the first classic New York piece that Let There Be Neon actually restored. So this is Grinja Appliances. They're on First Avenue and 2nd Street in Manhattan. And this piece actually, unlike other pieces, was deinstalled off of the building, brought back to our shop for a complete renovation. And I have a shot here of two of our team actually working on the piece. So we removed all the neon once it was in our shop. We repainted the inside of the letters and then put the neon back and reinstalled the sign in all its glory. And I know we're going to talk about why some signs do get restored and some get lost forever, but I'll go through some of these pieces first and we can come back to that. So again, Grinja was really the first historic piece that Let There Be Neon worked on. And I'm going to say this was about 1982 or 83 that it was finalized. It's been serviced and refurbished since the original restoration, but not a ground up restoration like we did initially. Another piece that we're really proud of is the Old Town Bar on 18th Street. It's really a beautiful piece. We believe it's pre-war, which is extremely rare. We could tell by the shape of the can, which is very unusual, but typical of that time period. And again, this piece was in our shop. We completely restored it. And something that I will talk about, again, why some pieces do get restored, is what's so interesting about the Old Town Bar piece and the Grinja piece is that both of these establishments own their buildings, which is what I believe is a very strong reason why these signs still exist and haven't disappeared. Old Town is still open. It's one of the most original bars left in New York City for sure. This is a much more recent renovation that we did for the Beatrice Inn in the West Village. On the left is the original condition of the sign when we received it, and on the right is the restored version. Beatrice Inn was an old restaurant. It was closed for many years. It was purchased by a new team. They restored it, and one of the first things that they wanted to take care of was the neon sign. It is a double-sided sign, so we're only looking at one view here. Double-sided signs like this are usually known as a blade sign, sometimes an upright because it's vertical. And again, just another great example of a piece that we've restored that remains part of New York City history. This is another piece that's in the West Village, the Fedora Bar. This sign was a disaster. And what's interesting about this story is that the owners of the building wanted to save the sign, which is wonderful. And the existing sign was in such poor condition that they took it off the building and they stored it in the back of a storage space. And then they had another company, not us, recreate the sign, which is, of course, completely different than restoring or refurbishing a sign. And when they saw the quote unquote new sign, they were so upset because it looked like a new sign. So after a certain period of time, they sent us this photograph and asked us if there was anything we could do to actually restore and renovate the original sign, which we did. And on the left-hand side is the finished piece in our shop, and on the right-hand side is the installation of the actual original piece. Again, this piece was in such poor condition, we had to restore the metal, of course, the painting and the neon. There was no neon on the sign when we got it, but we did have historical photos of the neon, so we knew what the colors would be, so it could be authentically recreated. We found a lot of rodent nests and bird nests inside the sign. It was pretty disgusting, but it came out really beautiful. And it just doesn't look like a brand new sign. And everybody was really pleased with this. This is Palamba Academy of Music, which is up in the Bronx. Family-owned business for many years. And the owner wound up retiring. But prior to that, he wanted to always make sure that his signs were lit and in operational condition, which they were. And we're really proud of working on this piece, especially pieces that are outside of Manhattan in the outer boroughs, because I believe that they're quite underserved. And there's a lot of signs that could use restoration work in the outer boroughs. But what happened with Palumbo is that after the owner decided to retire, he didn't want to scrap the sign. So in partnership with our good friends at the American Sign Museum in Cincinnati, portions of this sign went to the museum. And of course, the museum was thrilled. And needless to say, the owners and the family of the business really were touched by the fact that they even wanted the sign in their historical collection. A few years ago, in fact, during the Obama administration, I had taken a trip to Cuba for the first time. And I had heard rumors that there was a working neon person in Cuba, and nobody seemed to know anything about them. And on the very last day of our visit there, we finally had a friend of ours make a connection and find the discovery, who is now my good friend, Kadir Lopez, who's also a neon artist, was in the process of finding and restoring these historic signs in Havana and the rest of Cuba. What was so amazing about it is that since the revolution, a lot of these signs were deinstalled and was supposed to be destroyed, but a lot of the people wound up keeping the signs because they were part of their community and they loved them so much. And Kadir and myself quickly bonded and formed a lifelong friendship that continues to this day. And Let There Be Neon partnered with Havana Light, as his company was known. And this was one of the first signs that we helped renovate. The top photo showing the original condition of the sign, which actually was still hanging, one of the few that was still on display, taken down and restored by Kadir and his team. And Let There Be Neon's part in this restoration was providing materials for the sign because they just couldn't get any materials in Cuba. And the borders were open enough that we could share materials with them, that it wasn't a problem. And it's still really not much of a problem because everything is done is what the immigration terms, quote unquote, in for the benefit of the Cuban people. And that was the pretense that we went under on this, which is completely true. We had to fill out documentation forms up the kazoo. And we also provided design guidance, understanding what the original colors might have been. And Kadir's team did the work in Havana. And again, one of the signs we're most proud of is we still continue to partner with Havana Light. This sign and a few others kind of brings us to a fun part of New York, 42nd Street in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, before it became gentrified. And this is the original Peeporama sign, which, as we were told by the New York Historical Society back in the day, was the last remaining peep show or adult sign that remained in the Times Square district before everything was cleaned up. So it was really the last remaining sign, and it was brought to us for renovation work, which I find extremely hysterical, is that New York City tried so hard to clean up Times Square because they couldn't stand the filth, and they then wound up displaying it in a historical society Times Square history display. So on one hand, they want to get rid of it because they couldn't stand what it stood for, but then you wait around too long and everything becomes hip eventually. So again, we can talk a little bit about that, but I find that a little annoying, to be honest with everybody. And here's another sign, the Pussycat, which was another adult shop in the Times Square district. Though the image on the left is actually the original sign, the image on the right is a recreation that we created for Times Square bowling alley, Bowmore Lanes. And it's as close a reproduction as we could manage. The curtains also were part of the original sign. And through historical photographs, we recreated it as best we can. Now, you can't tell in this photograph because it's a still photograph, but those curtains do animate left and right, center outwards. And again, a very dramatic piece. And I know it's crazy because those are actually bowling lanes. So one would think, how often does that neon actually get broken? Well, the truth is very rarely, and not because of the bowling balls, which is great. Here's another historical piece that we've done. We did this for a family. The image on the left was given to us from the original family, from the David Katz Delicatessen. And Mr. Katz, who I believe was the grandson, brought us the sign. That is the original sign on the right, completely refurbished. It was just a lot of broken neon. So we fixed the neon. We refabricated it so that it would be in the same format and held up. Thankfully, we had the photograph, the historical photograph, to show us exactly how the sign was laid out and laid out properly. And we just finished another kosher delicatessen for somebody in New Jersey that we posted on our Instagram account, but I don't have that here. But it's interesting how similar the signs were. I want to talk a little bit about some pieces that we've been getting kind of tips on, that are pieces that are about to be taken down and possibly disposed of forever. This is Goldberger's Pharmacy on the Upper East Side. Now, what happened here, and we have another recent piece that we've worked on, is the Goldberger's Pharmacy. We believe from the early 1950s, these signs are dated, though the pharmacy is older than that. We're on the building, operational, not operational. And what happened was that the landlord was renovating the building, and landmarks came in, and I don't know the whole story behind this, but they said that the neon sign was not original to the building, so it had to be taken down upon the renovation of the landmark work. So the owner of the pharmacy loved the sign so much, he said, do you guys have any ideas? And what we wound up agreeing to was, rather than the sign be lost forever, let's save it. Let's put it on a new backing and wire it up and make it self-contained. And let's put it inside the pharmacy, so at least it's not lost. So to this day, it does remain inside Goldberger's Pharmacy. In fact, they had to move a couple of streets north while the renovation was being done, with the plan that they would move back into the original space. And that's where the sign is to this day. So To us, it's ridiculous. It was on the outside of the building. At least it's not lost now. It's on the inside of the building, and at least it's saved. Here's another perfect example of the same scenario. We got a lot of calls on this piece. We got word originally from somebody, this is on Nassau Street in the financial district, that somebody was working on this storefront and renovating it, and they uncovered this beautiful Lofts Candy sign that was behind the more recent storefront signage and facade. And we got calls from all kinds of people and sign geeks, that we like to call them, who just love old signs, and asked if we could save it. And we went down there and we figured out that we could save it, and that the person who was taking the space over wanted us to save it, so we renovated the sign. Now, what's happened recently within the last month is that the current owner of the space loves the sign, but they're renovating the facade. So we're going to do something very similar. We've already deinstalled the sign. And by the way, we received a lot of phone calls like, what happened to the Love's Candy sign? Somebody's taken it down. Do you know anything about it? So we're at least able to reassure them the sign is safe. It's in our shop. We're going to put it on a new backing, and the new owner is happily going to save the sign and put it inside their space. So it's not the worst scenario. It's not the best where it stays on the original facade it was meant for, but at least the sign is being saved. And this is another renovation. I could just speak personally, because I'm a record collector, that this was a Capitol Records sign that was in the Times Square area, believe it or not, even though they're based in Los Angeles. And it was inside a vestibule window looking out onto Times Square from the 40s, 50s, and 60s. And a gentleman used to come in with the sign for about 15 years whenever it needed repair work. And every time he'd come into the shop, I would ask him if he would ever sell the sign, and the answer was always no. But thankfully, one day he came in and he said he was ready to sell the sign, and the sign is now in LTBN's permanent collection, and my personal #1 favorite sign in the world. This is a piece, Palace Suits. The image on the upper left was how we originally received it. It is just the face of the sign. There was no backing box or any sort. And it's a paint sign. It's not what would typically be considered a porcelain enamel sign. And it was so worn out, but I must say beautifully so. And this is a classic case, is that it had no neon on it. It just had this beautiful patina face. And what we decided to do was we built a new box for it, which you can't see because it's behind the face. We left the patina exactly as is. We didn't touch it at all. We used some traditionally historical correct colors in neon for the piece, which is just the blue and the gold. It's a clear blue, so it's a clear tubing with argon gas, and the gold, which is a novial yellow gold tubing. And the piece now hangs in our studio. And again, it's part of our original collection. Oh, and I just want to mention a quick thing about this is that there are these, what they call free sites, neighborhood sites, where people have items that they might no longer have use for. And rather than put it on the street or try to go through the hassle of selling it or something, it's all done in very good faith. And they might post something and say, does anybody want this? And this particular piece was posted on my neighborhood site. And they were like, we got this from Chicago. We've moved 20 times. Every time we move the sign with us. We never do anything with it. It weighs a ton. Does anybody want it? Well, needless to say, it took about 3 seconds to run around the corner and pick up the sign. So it's really a great story. This is another piece that was saved. Stetson Hats sign. Stetson Hats is currently on 5th Avenue in the high 20s. I believe it's 28th Street. This sign was originally on 6th Avenue, kind of catty corner to where Macy's is. And uh, they moved the sign from that location to their current location. We had nothing to do with the moving of it, but we thought the sign was gone forever. And we actually made a new outdoor sign slash marquee for Stetson on Fifth Avenue, never knowing all this time that they had the original sign buried in the back of the shop, until we got a phone call from them last year that said, we're doing renovation inside the shop. We're not moving, but we have this old sign. Are you interested in it? Well, needless to say, we were very interested in it. We went, it took about 4 of us to get it out of the shop, onto the truck, back to the studio, where we cleaned it up. It didn't take a lot. It was in very good condition, just a few broken pieces in neon. We didn't clean it too much, but we did replace all the transformers and the wiring inside. And again, it hangs in our shop right now. And this is, as everybody knows, Russ and Daughters, and still family owned. And that probably a good time for me to talk about a little theory I have about why some classic neon signs are saved and some are not. I strongly believe that the main reason why signs disappear is simply because of the high cost of real estate in New York. And somebody takes over new space, it's got a beautiful old facade or sign on it, they don't care. They get rid of the sign. Well, I mean, I can't say I blame them much if the sign has Fred's name on it and somebody named Alice is taking over a store and wants to name it by her name. But there's no lack of disregard for classic neon signs. And not only neon signs, but even beautiful painted signs and metal signs from the day. And Russ and Daughters is a perfect example, as is Gringes and Old Town, of people who luckily own the building that their business is in. So they retain ownership, they expand their legacy of their business. And Russ and Daughters, like I said, is still family owned. They're just in love with their neon. They're just so in love with it that when they started to expand, they wanted to make sure that we followed the guidelines of the original Russ and Daughters sign. And this is a shot of the team, the family and the Russ and Daughters team inside Hudson Yards with the new sign, which again follows the original sign as close as we possibly could. And I mean, it's iconic. It's part of their brand, and they're extremely loyal to us as we are to them. We've worked on about half a dozen locations now with them, and every single one they've made sure that they've had their beautiful neon sign recreated. So again, the original piece on Houston Street, which we also renovated and was back in our shop, has been recreated time and time again. They've got a location in the Brooklyn Navy Yard as well. And that's my theory about why some signs disappear and some don't. Chelsea Hotel, one of our proudest moments. We have been repairing the sign for the past 8 years or so. The hotel has gotten a lot of bad publicity because of different ownership, not following through, kicking out original residents. But luckily, the new team saw the importance of renovating this properly, taking care of people who still lived at the hotel and recognized their residency. And one of their most important goals was to make sure that the sign was working properly. So because their budget was so tight, I could only imagine the expense of renovating the hotel, let alone the Chelsea Hotel. What had happened was we would just basically put Band-Aids on the sign for about 7 or 8 years. And just recently, about a month ago, we completed the proper restoration. So the image on the left was the sign as is, and the image on the right was taken about 2 weeks ago. So all the neon came off of the sign. We painted the sign, we repainted it. We kept all the original colors as landmarks dictated, because not only is the building landmark, but believe it or not, the sign itself has a specific landmark designation. And so we took all the neon off, we painted the sign, we removed all the original transformers and wiring, Their electrician brought new power feeds to the sign to ensure everything was properly working. We remade all of the neon 100% so the colors are consistent, because through the years, different colors might have been fixed by different shops. Again, we've only put our hands on it recently, the past 8 years, whereas prior, a zillion different shops and studios might have been repairing the sign. And so all transformers are new, all wiring is new, all neon is new. It's a little too bright. They asked us to dim it, believe it or not. But again, super proud of this piece. And I believe this might be the final restoration piece to show. And then we could talk about some missing in action pieces. But this is one of the greatest neon pieces in the world. I will go down saying that right off the bat. What was so interesting about this piece is that we never worked on it before. I've passed it a million times growing up in New York, and hands down, it was my favorite neon sign that I never laid a hand on. And for whatever reason, it was being serviced incorrectly because it never really worked. And one day I got a call from the owner, Mike, who asked what it would cost to fix the sign, because I guess he was frustrated with the other shops because nothing was really being accomplished. And when I gave him the price after we took a look and did a site survey, unfortunately, I can't repeat the words that he said to me, even though we're best of pals now. But to make a long story short, it was suggested by our good friend Josh Silva from Sign of the Time Instagram page that perhaps we could try doing a GoFundMe page, because Mike, the owner, couldn't afford to refurbish the sign. It's just a small business. We couldn't afford as a business to just do it as a gift. So we set a goal of $15,000, which we felt might have been a little under budget, and did the GoFundMe. And very proud to say that easily within an hour, we succeeded the goal. And we wound up hitting $22,000, as everybody from every walk of life contributed to the cost for the restoration of the Dublin House. And we wound up costing close to about $26,000. So we figured it was the least we could do, since everybody else contributed as well. And these are all original colors on the sign. It's a beautiful Novio gold glass, which does not have a coating in it, which we could talk about more if anybody has any questions, which gives it that beautiful green because it's a yellow glass that has argon gas inside it. So when, just like watercolors, when you mix green and blue, you're going to get a green. I'm sorry, yellow and blue, you get a green. And then the pink lettering, which is also original to the sign. And I want to talk about some pieces that we're in the process of trying to renovate. So this is the famous Amsterdam newspaper up in Harlem. And it's a little difficult to see, but on the side of the building, there's this long blade sign. And we're in discussions with the owner of the newspaper to see if we can, and if they would be comfortable doing another GoFundMe page, because we feel that that would be the only opportunity to really put the correct funding and correct work into renovating their upright sign, which is original. It's much more original than the storefront sign above the entryway that is in much better condition. So we're hoping to renovate the Amsterdam News sign as well. The last few slides are pieces that are on our wish list. So this is the Oldsmobile sign that's in Brooklyn. It's on Flatbush Avenue and Avenue D. This was originally, so I'm told, from Kane's Oldsmobile, which operated in the 40s through the 60s. This sign is still up on the building. It is absolutely drop dead gorgeous. The neon is mostly intact from what we could tell. It's a triangular sign, so it has two faces to it. And the piece de resistance, of course, is the clock on the bottom. If anybody knows anything about our shop, they know that we collect vintage neon clocks. So this piece hits every possible wish list. It's neon, it's patina, it's got a clock, and it's automobile related. So we don't even know who owns the sign. So maybe somebody does and can make this happen. We're certainly willing. And this is a bit of an aged shot of the famous Bruno truck sales sign on the BQE. This is the image of it as you're driving west on the BQE, I'm sorry, east, going towards Queens. And as you come up over the hill and arise over the Gowanus Canal, you see this absolutely humongous, beautiful Bruno truck sales sign. And here's a little closer image of it. Now, the best part of this story is that the owner of Bruno Trucks, the owner of the sign, and the owner of the building that it's on happens to be my next door neighbor in Brooklyn. And though the business itself doesn't exist anymore, we periodically talk about possibly renovating the sign, but it's really an expensive undertaking. But again, it's on our wish list. And here's another piece that we believe now is lost forever. So Neil's coffee shop on the Upper East Side, 71st and Lexington, family-run business, recently closed. The sign is possibly gone. We haven't had a confirmation from that. The luncheonette owner passed away way back. Apparently, the family ran it for a little bit of time, fell behind on rent, and then eventually just gave it up. So again, it's on our wish list. We'd love to restore it and give it a home somewhere where everybody can see it and enjoy it on the streets of New York. Another wish list here is the Berkeley coats and suits shop sign. So this is long gone. We don't know where it is. It was last seen in 2018. The business is much further gone than the sign. This is in the South Slope in Brooklyn on Fifth Avenue, or it was. It's now a bar. So again, we would absolutely love to find this sign and restore it. That beautiful, beautiful turquoise background and those pink letters are just so stunning. Oh, and this is my dog, Mazzy. I just always like to end with her because she's a beautiful dog, but we had to put her down a couple of years ago. But that's Mazzy. And I think maybe it's best to turn it over for questions now, Michelle.
Yes, that was great. Thank you. I very much agree. I've always loved the Dublin House sign. So I have a few questions. If anyone has any questions, you can put them in the chat. So can you talk a little bit about like the origins of neon and neon lighting?
So I'm not a historian. I can only share with what I've known and picked up through people I've worked with through the years, which are a lot of conflicting stories. But the easy part of the story is that in like 1921 or so, George Claude, the Frenchman, people think that he discovered and invented neon, but my understanding is he did not. What he did discover or create and hence patent was the process of neon. So the process of putting neon gas and also eventually argon gas, neon is red, argon is blue, into a tube, a vacuum tube, sealing it off, putting electrodes on the end of the tube, electrifying it, and creating the gas light. So the process was patented by George Claude. But the interesting thing is that there's a photograph from the 1893 Chicago World's Fair where Tesla is displaying neon tubing. So that's what I know. And there's also theories on what was the first neon sign in America, which for many years people thought it was the Packard sign in Los Angeles. That's been proven not to be the case by people who are far better at history than I am. So that's what I know about the history of neon.
Thank you. Sam Friedman would like to know, can you speak a bit about the hunt for historical/discontinued neon colors?
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Sam. Um, what we do is we purchase what we call raw glass, which is tubing before it's actually neon. It's raw material, and it comes in different colors. And some of the colors are gained by the tubing color itself, as well as the phosphorus that might be on the inside. And the phosphorus might not look like anything except a white powder until it's has the gas put in the tube. It's sealed off and electrically charged so that the UV lights the phosphorus into different colors: blues, pinks, yellows, greens, etc. But what happened was that for many years, Corning Glass in upstate New York was a very large provider of the raw material of glass. And they stopped, I believe, in the 60s at some point, providing neon tubing for the neon industry. Now, there are other firms that have provided the material and continue to do so. But there is always this hunt for the original vintage glass because it does look different. A perfect example is the old ruby red. We could still get ruby red. It's made in Italy, known as like Murano glass uh, collectively, but it's just not the same. The old Corning ruby had a dark, dark blood red to it that just looks unlike anything else. There's another glass, which is one of my favorites, called uranium, which Corning made, which was literally a uranium glass, like old uranium glassware that you might see in a vintage shop with like plates and cups and glasses. It was the same color. And Let There Be Neon has a certain amount of the vintage glass in stock that we use very sparingly. And I know that there are a lot of neon shops out there who care about the history of vintage glass. So it's getting harder and harder to locate. A lot of times, an old timer will go out of business and sell his contents, and you might be lucky enough to find some vintage glass with among those contents. I mean, it's like a needle in a haystack, really, at this point.
Thank you. You spoke a little bit about, I just want to make sure we didn't miss anything. Someone says, can you explain the different gases and different glasses that you use? Okay, you just talked about that glass. Are there any other gases that you use?
So, as a commercial sign studio, even though we do a lot of artistic work, a lot of artists work in xenon gas, which is a very light lavender color. Sometimes they work in, I'm trying to think now of the different gases used. Helium is used. The issue with those colors is sometimes they burn hot. What I mean burn hot is that they're really hot to the touch, whereas just the opposite is true for neon and argon. You could touch it and hold it almost for as long as you want. It burns very cool. But those other gases for their color properties are used in a lot of art pieces, but not what we use. We just use the argon, which is blue, and the neon, which is red. And again, by combining the different gases with the different glass or phosphorus colors, that's how we get the many colors. We stock about 92 different colors of neon right now.
Interesting. Alexis wants to know, is the post road sign at the Boston Road Food Town in any danger of disappearing? Any chance at restoration? Do you know what that is?
I don't. Which sign?
The post road sign at the Boston Road Food Town.
Yeah, I don't know the sign, but if it's not lit, I would say it's in danger of disappearing. That seems to be the case, unfortunately.
And someone else is asking, do you think there's some movement towards outdoor display neon preservation in New York City? I hear you about saving the signs and putting them inside the businesses, which is great, but I wonder if you think the sentiment is changing at all towards the desire to keep the neons lit on the street. Are there any local historic nonprofits involved in helping save larger signs?
So there's no secret society or public society that we're aware of. It's really just an organic movement. People see something, and this is what we know about. I hope that there are other shops and studios doing the same work that we are to some extent. Um, but it's really a guerrilla war. It's really difficult. Something I wanted to mention also, and this brings it up, is the whole landmark situation. So, as a commercial sign studio, which is part of our business, a large part of our business, um, every so often we, and I don't say this too negatively, but we run up against the landmarks board when a new location is going into an existing space. And if it's in a landmark district or if the building is landmark, and I completely understand this, of course, um, landmark approval is required for exterior work, sometimes interior, but that's not our field. For if there's a sign inside it, it would be, but other than signs, it's not our field. And so we have to do presentations to landmarks. Most of the time, I will say 90% of the time, they don't want to see neon outside, which really kind of kills me because to me, it's more original to the facade than a lot of these, what they call backlit or halo lit LED signs, which they find acceptable, which I think are just not compatible with the visual of the buildings that they're trying to protect. Whereas something like, the Dublin House is how could you have anything else possibly on that building? So on one hand, it's funny that we're up fighting and going up against landmarks and trying to save the neon. And on the other hand, when they have an old sign that exists, they're all about trying to save it only because it's old. I think that we could come up with new work that can be historically correct as well, and we're not being given that opportunity. And I might add that the owners want the neon. They prefer that. They know that it's a higher impact sign, that it's individual. It's not going to look cookie cutter like every other mall in every other town. So that's my response to that.
Yeah, that is interesting. I'm surprised that they would be against it. It's interesting that you have the Hotel Chelsea where the sign is so notable that itself is a landmark, and then other instances where they're insisting that it be either changed or removed. I'd like to know the actual story, what happened with the other one you were referring to, the Goldbergers, because at no point would they make someone remove a sign. So I'm interested to know like what their they must have been doing a certificate of appropriateness to actually do like a restoration. And so if it was being brought back to like an earlier period,
Right.
then the neon would be inappropriate, if you're looking at something that's from early 1900s, then they might have felt that the neon was too contemporary, too much later. But yeah, it'd be interesting to know what the restoration was and why they were against having the neon in the outside.
Well, no, that's exactly right. Because the story, as I was told from the owner of the pharmacy, was that's precisely what happened. Is that the renovation was being done to the building facade that had to be typical and correct to the time period, which predated the neon. So
Okay.
that's pretty much exactly what the story was there.
Yeah. Yeah, that is a hard one to sort of navigate because it's like, well, the neon is beautiful and we would love it, but also it's incongruous with, the time period that you're trying to restore it to. Um, so I wonder what the discussion
Well,
was.
our feeling always is when in doubt, the neon is correct.
That's a fair way to go. Also talking about nonprofits trying to save neons. The only one I'm aware of is the Neon Museum in Vegas. They they've done, I know, a lot of like collecting and
Right,
restoring. But I don't know if they go out like
right,
and try
right.
to
So
actively do it.
so the neon, do they call it the neon graveyard or is that another location? I don't remember.
Yeah, that's
But
the same thing.
Yeah, I visited the one in Vegas. I mean, number one, I think that their focus is Las Vegas signage. Um, and you know, they give a wonderful tour, of course. And I think that they're they're I mean, it's wonderful that they're saving the signs and people know like it's not in the dumpster now. We bring it to the museum. And they restore it as best they can. I don't think that they do restoration work on every piece they have, but the American Sign Museum in Cincinnati is, in fact, the place that does exactly what we're looking to do. We have a few neon signs from New York that were going into the dumpster that wound up going to the Sign Museum in Cincinnati. The Palumbo Music is one. The Clover Deli, which was on, I believe it was 2nd Avenue and 34th Street or 42nd Street. My good friend Josh will correct me. He's probably fuming as we speak. But they took the original Clover Deli sign and they took the facade, which was these glass panels, these beautiful deco panels, and it's now on display. They rebuilt the storefront at the Sign Museum in Cincinnati.
Yeah, so Kate, neither of us are aware of any nonprofits in New York City that are doing it.
Yeah.
One person wants to know, wait, sorry, where was it? What measures can be taken to protect neon signs from vandalism and weather and such things?
Yeah. Never been asked the vandalism question before, but I mean, there's nothing you could do about vandalism. What can you possibly do? A lot of the old pieces you'll see outdoor signs have like cages around them. There's a wonderful piece on Atlantic Avenue in Brooklyn. I believe I'm pronouncing it correctly. The Montiero Bar, which is on the lower portion of Atlantic Avenue, right by the BQE, and it's got a cage around it. So that was one way that some people got around that. In terms of weather, you know, if the sign is built correctly and installed correctly, it should be okay. I mean, neon is glass, it's outside, it's definitely prone to weather changes, rain and wet weather. Um, it does happen, but the good news is that it can be repaired.
So how long does the neon usually last?
So, one of my favorite questions. So, obviously, neon is glass, it can break, and like I said, it can be repaired. But I like to tell people 50, 60, 70 years. We've got a old diner sign in our studio from the Peekskill Diner that's, I'd say, about 60 years old now, and it's on every day. And since we refurbished it some 30 years ago, it hasn't needed anything additional.
The collection that you said you guys have, can people come and just look at that, or is that just for your own fun amusement?
So, so we're on the ground floor on White Street in Tribeca, and since COVID, we haven't really been open to the public. All the pieces are displayed, and the displays change once in a while. But if somebody emails us and asks really, really nice, we would consider showing them the pieces.
Okay. Josh would like to know, have you ever heard of the Harmony Record sign? That one should be saved.
Josh is making a joke because Josh alerted us to this beautiful sign that was coming down in the Bronx. He would say decades ago, but he'd be exaggerating. And the sign is here in the shop. And every time he comes in, even though he's not a very nice man, I might mention, he looks at it and says, "So how's the renovation on that coming along?" It's only been about 8 years, I think. But every time I tell him the same story, which is true, we are getting to it. It's getting closer. So that's how it's coming along.
Any day now, Josh. Let's see. Are there particular types of signs that you prefer to make or you like to make?
No, not really. I mean, we love working on renovation work, but that's only about 10% of our business. We love working on the contemporary artwork because we love working with artists. And, I got to say, like Rudy Stern, the founder of the company, we've really followed his philosophy throughout the years is that every piece we do, whether it's a pizza sign or high-end art that's going into the Guggenheim, of which we've done both, has some type of art involved in it because that's just the way we do things.
Alexis would like to know, do you have a set of rules about when to completely repaint and when to preserve the patina and paint discoloration?
Um, our philosophy is to leave it as is, unless somebody tells us different. I can't think of a time other than the fedora sign, which really just needed a complete overhaul. I'd have to say that was maybe the only sign that we had to really redo. We left some patina on there. I mean, we worked on the original piece itself. And again, it was a double-sided sign. One side is usually in better condition than the opposite side uh, because of weather and which way it's facing the sun most of the day. But I would have to say, leave it as is.
Okay. Well, it is 7 o'clock. So I think, and I don't see any other questions.
Okay.
So once again, this has been recorded. Please do check out our YouTube channel. You can watch all of our other preservation school classes and tours. Lots of people are saying great presentation, great job.
Thanks. And I do have a few thank yous, if I may.
Sure, please.
So I want to thank you, Michelle. Thank you, and the Historic District Council. Really appreciate the opportunity. I want to thank Molly Ray, who helped with the presentation. Couldn't have done it without her. I want to thank Josh Silva from the Mega Instagram page, Sign of the Time. And like you said, this monumental evening is going to be available on YouTube. But I also understand we might be in competition at next year's Cannes Festival for this, possibly Sundance. And I heard that we're rumored to be on the short list for the Nobel Peace Prize as well, which unfortunately is a very short list at the moment. But thank you to
So
everybody.
close.
Really appreciate it.
Well, likewise, thank you very much. This has been very fascinating. I think we've all very much enjoyed it. And yes, also thank Molly for me because I was in contact with her as well.
Absolutely wonderful.
So thank you everyone for joining us, and yes, have a good night.
Good night. Thank you.